saw a woman on the street. Thought it was my mother. Caught my breath when she turned. I could see it was another. Brief encounters, tricks of light. How I wish for things with all my might, but birds keep gathering for flight. Will return when the time is right. Today I sense it all is near, evermore and soon will be. Within us, between us is everything we need. Press my palm tree after tree, feel the weight of time. Light came down on the silver threads, all mixed with rain and pine. I don't know when, I never will, what rises in the evening still. How empty cups keep getting filled. How healing comes when the hope rebuilds. Today I sense it all is near, evermore and soon will be. Within us, between us is everything we need. Everything will go to dust, but from the dust returns. Leaves just down with no regret. Another season turns. Today I sense it all is near, evermore and soon will be. Within us and between us is everything we need. Everything we need.
Everything we need is here. This gift of a beautiful day, can you believe it? This wonderful, beloved community that we all share. Everything we need is here. Come, let's worship. Lynn Marples is our worship associate today, so I'll light the chalice, and then Lynn and I will say our chalice lighting words. Join us if you would like to from home.
Let this flame be to us a symbol of the wholeness we seek.
Its brightness dispelling gloom, lighting a path to faith and hope.
Its glow reminding us of the sacred bonds that link us to all living things.
Its radiance calling us to cast the light of freedom, justice, and peace upon all the world. Well, good morning, my friends, whoever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey. For this 1 hour, you're part of this congregation and you are welcome. And it is a glorious day. What a wonderful day to talk about nature and all the gifts of nature. So we are blessed. So as we begin our time together, Let's say hello to one another as we've been doing in this Zoom land for the last over a year. So Dustin, if you would do gallery, the invitation is unmute yourself and spend a minute or two saying hi to one another. So let's unmute and say hello.
Good morning.
Hi,
Hey,
everybody.
everybody. Good to see you.
Hello, everyone.
And
Good
morning.
Yes, great flowers.
Hi.
Eleanor,
Hello.
hi.
Hi.
hey, everybody. Good
Eleanor,
to see you.
Hi.
Hi,
Stacy.
Hello.
Hi, Barbara. Morning. Good morning.
Do you know, I was thinking this week, I don't want to say that the pandemic is over, but we certainly have made such strides. And we are awaiting the governor's press conference early in the week to tell us it may be the case that the recommendation will be that we no longer need masks if we've been vaccinated. So I hope you saw the announcement in the Thursday distribution. The Safe Congregations Committee has determined that it is safe for small groups and committees and book groups and that sort of thing from the church to start meeting again in the building. The recommendation is that you meet in the Harvey Hall, that you do wear masks unless we hear from the governor differently this week, and then the Safe Congregations folks will make a further determination. But for now, you need to wear masks and do social distancing in the hall. But we've already had a couple of groups sign up, so it's really exciting. It feels like life and energy is starting to come back into the building. We'll be on Zoom for the balance of the church year, except for we'll be on Zoom for the third Sunday of June, which is our last Sunday together of the regular church year. But we will also be in person on the front lawn of the church, God willing, if we have as beautiful a day as today. So that will be our Flower Communion Sunday. It'll be outside on the front lawn of the church, something to look forward to. So it feels like we have made strides, and we just hope that this all continues. So we feel very blessed. Let's see what else I have. By way of announcements, actually, we have Nancy Ovasca, the chair of our stewardship committee, who would like to say a few words about our stewardship campaign this year. Take it away, Nancy.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Ovasca, chair of the stewardship committee. The committee is composed of myself, Amy Hamilton, Mary Flanagan, and Tracy Wagner. As you know, the pledge drive started 5 weeks ago. Almost all the pledges are in, with just a few people remaining. It's been a very different drive this year as to how we conducted it due to the COVID, but it's been a very successful drive. The success is because of you and all your generosity. As of yesterday, 107 pledges have been returned for a total of, drum roll, $174,597. This year, over 50% of the people have increased their pledges. The committee fully expects to reach our goal of 175,000, and in fact exceed it by a fair amount once the remaining pledges are in. So if you haven't pledged, if you've never pledged before, or it's been a few years since you pledged, or you have questions, you can contact Amy Hamilton, myself, Tracy Wagner, or Mary Flanagan. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you to all of you. You really made a difference this year. And I will put in chat people's email addresses on the committee so you can contact us. So thanks again.
Thank you, Nancy. And Dustin, will you go to gallery one more time? I want you all, the invitation is to unmute yourselves and say a big thank you to our hardworking stewardship committee of 4.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stewardship
Thank you.
Committee. Good work. Nicely done.
Very,
Good
thank you,
job.
Tracy.
Great
Thank
job.
you, Amy. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, everybody.
Good work.
Thank you.
Work. Thank you. That's simply amazing to have such a successful stewardship campaign in the midst of a pandemic. It's a tribute to the folks on the stewardship committee, and it's a tribute to each one of you who have contributed so generously to First Parish Church. So thank you. So before we move along in our service, we are drawn to the events of the week, and my heart has been really saddened by the events in the Middle East. I know the Middle East for me is kind of a special place. I was thinking back, the first time I went to the Middle East was when I was an attorney, and I went at the invitation of a member of the Ben Gurion family. So I saw the Israeli side of things. And then on one of my sabbaticals a few years ago, I went with a group leader who was a member of the, was affiliated with the PLO. So I saw the Palestinian side of things. And I kind of have formed my own opinion, which I'm not going to share this morning because that's not important. What I'd like to do today is invite us all to take a moment of silence and hold all the folks in the Middle East in our thoughts and our prayers. That the life over there is just so difficult. I'm in a study group with a couple of rabbis, and one of the rabbis has 2 children still living in Israel, and she was describing the other day, living in Tel Aviv, how, you know, her daughter and her grandchildren need to run into bomb shelters every 15 minutes as, you know, the Tel Aviv is getting hit by rockets and all that. It's just, it's really a difficult situation. So many children have been killed already in this skirmish. So I invite us to take a moment of silence and hold in our thoughts the folks who live in that part of the world, which really is a very important part of the world for all of us whose traditions come out of the Christian tradition. So let's take a moment of silence together. Amen. And now Lynn Marples has a reading for us.
Good morning. My reading is from Thoreau in his book Walden. Thoreau would often sit in his driveway for hours and simply watch and listen as the sun moved across the sky and as the light and shadows changed almost imperceptibly. In his book, Walden, he described it this way. There were times when I could not afford to sacrifice the bloom of the present moment to any work, whether of the head or hand. I love a broad margin to my life. Sometimes, on a summer morning, having taken my accustomed bath, I sat in my sunny doorway from sunrise till noon, amidst the pines and hickories and sumacs, in undisturbed solitude and stillness, while the birds sang around or flitted noiseless through the house, until by the sun falling in my west window, or the noise of some traveler's wagon on the distant highway, I was reminded of the lapse of time. I grew in those seasons like corn in the night, and they were far better than any work of the hands would have been. They were not time subtracted from my life, but so much over and above my usual allowance. Thoreau.
Secret life is enjoying passage of time. Any fool can do it. There ain't nothing to it. Nobody knows how we got to top of the hill. Since we're on our way down, might as well enjoy the ride. Secret love isn't opening up your heart. It's okay to feel afraid. Don't let it stand in your way. 'Cause anyone knows that love is the only road. Since we're only here for a while, might as well show some style. Give us a smile, isn't it a lovely ride? Sliding down, I'll be gliding down. Try not to try too hard, it's just a lovely ride. The thing about time is that time isn't really real. Just your point of view. How does it feel for you? 'Cause Einstein said he could never understand it all. Planets spinning through space, smile upon your face. Welcome to the human race, some kind of lovely ride. I'll be sliding down, I'll be gliding down. Try not to try too hard, it's just a lovely ride. Isn't it a lovely ride? See me sliding down, gliding down. Try not to try too hard, it's just a lovely ride. The secret of love is enjoying passage of time.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go down and lie where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. And I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. And for a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. My spiritual friends, the poet Wendell Berry, first published this poem in 1968. 1968, that infamous year when the world was in such turmoil. The Vietnam War was still at its height, and after the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, there was no doubt that this was a time when anybody could understandably sink into despair about the world and the human condition. But Wendell Berry reminds us that when despair grows in us and we are fearful for our own lives or the lives of the people we love, the peace of wild things is always available to us as an antidote to our fears. We can always rely on the peace of nature, and we can rest there and be calmed and renewed and feel free. But in our pre-pandemic lives, my friends, we were always very busy, weren't we, in our modern way of living? We were separated from nature so often and from the peace that nature can offer to us, separated from the lessons that nature teaches us about the cycles of life and birth and death and regeneration, about the whole great lessons about the beauty of this wonderful creation that we all inhabit. But during the pandemic, many of us rediscovered in many ways the peace of wild things. I know I often think that my daily beach walks were one of the things that saved me over the past year or so. With the pandemic mounting, incidents of racial inequity constantly in front of us, the context, overall context of such political turmoil and a presidential election, we needed the peace of wild things, and many of us found nature once again. We Unitarian Universalists, we know deeply the healing powers of nature and the importance of nature for our spirits. We have, of course, 7 principles, but we also have 6 sources of our tradition. And the first source speaks to the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures. And this is one of the sources of our faith, our Unitarian Universalist faith. And our 6th source, a pretty popular source, speaks of how we draw inspiration from spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions that celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us in how to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. So, my friends, it was natural for we Unitarian Universalists to include something about wonder and something about nature as spiritual sources for us. After all, we carry what I like to call the transcendentalist gene from our spiritual ancestors like Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson is considered the father of transcendentalism. So let's talk a little bit about the transcendentalist stream of our tradition and its role in our Unitarian Universalist tradition today. If we review a little of our liberal Christian history, and we did come from the liberal Christian tradition, you'll remember that our early Calvinist cousins, who actually were founders of this gathered community, believed that all people were depraved sinners. Most were doomed to eternal damnation, and only the few so-called elect would be saved, and only by proclaiming Jesus Christ as their Savior. Well, after the Revolutionary War, in the early days of the Republic, there was this new sense of empowerment and confidence and a feeling that perhaps it was not true that human beings were nothing more than depraved worms, as Calvin used to say. There was this growing sense of the dignity, not the depravity, of human nature, and there was a high regard for human reason. So many Calvinist congregations, including this one, began to call ministers who quietly rejected the strict theological views of their forebears. And these liberal ministers began to preach a more hopeful gospel, one that omitted oftentimes the notion of original sin. They also began to speak of God as one instead of 3. In 1819, the liberal ministers finally made a clean break from their more orthodox colleagues, and the Unitarian tradition was born when William Ellery Channing delivered a sermon at an ordination in Baltimore. Many great theological moves happened as a result of sermons back then. William Ellery Channing was a Unitarian Christian. He believed that the miracles described in the Bible actually occurred, and that these miracles established the authority of Jesus, but not the divinity of Jesus. Channing's Baltimore sermon began the flowering of a decidedly liberal impulse in American Christianity. But another sermon that would come a few decades later would shift the trajectory of liberal religion even further. While he was a student at Harvard, Ralph Waldo Emerson had been a member of Channing's Federal Street Church, and he was deeply influenced by Channing. But over time, Emerson began to see how most Unitarian ministers, because of their very rationalistic bent, cared little for the human spirit and for human passions. Emerson finally came to believe that Christianity, as traditionally understood, including Unitarian Christianity, had come to a dead end. When Ralph Waldo Emerson was still a young Unitarian minister, he found himself in the middle of this debate. He was asked to be one of the folks in the debate over the nature of miracles found in the scripture. On the one hand, there were those who said that the miracle stories of the Bible were an essential ingredient to religion, not something that could simply be edited out without harming the Christian faith. Remember, William Ellery Channing had relied on the authority of miracles. The miracle stories weren't true. And if the miracle stories weren't true, then all the other truths in the Bible could be called into question. So for early Unitarians, the Bible was still the sole source of religious authority. So that included folks like William Ellery Channing. The Bible was the sole source of religious authority. On the other side of the debate about miracles was young Ralph Waldo Emerson, who found God in places outside of the Bible. He found God in nature and not in the suspension of the laws of nature. He delivered a famous divinity school address. It was at the graduation of a Harvard Divinity School class. And he challenged the hyper-rationalism of the older generation of what he called corpse-cold Unitarians. Sometimes we are referred to as the frozen chosen, but the corpse-cold Unitarian phrase comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson charged that the Unitarian faith had become dry and lifeless. He said this: "We can each have a first-hand experience with the divine. That is, that the sacred can be known by our own experience and by intuition, by opening up to the texts of all religions, and even by a simple walk in the woods." In his famous address, this was 1838, Emerson proposed a new theology, transcendentalism, a theology based on one's own experience of God in nature. And he called nature, and I quote, "the doors of whose temple stand open night and day for each one of us." Here are some other words from that divinity school address. Jesus spoke of miracles, for he felt that man's life was a miracle. But the word miracle, as pronounced by Christian churches, gives a false impression. It is a monster. It is not one with the blowing clover and the falling rain. The great miracle, my friends, for Emerson was this energizing force of the universe. He doesn't assume that all of us will know and experience this all of the time or even some of the time, but he does believe that by looking up at the vast night sky, by standing at the edge of the sea, by walking in the woods, by climbing a mountain, these spiritual practices help put the world into perspective. We may end up feeling small. I know when I walk on the beach many times, I feel very, very small. But when I think about feeling small, I'm reminded of a great story about Theodore Roosevelt when he was president. It said that he entertained diplomatic guests at the White House, and he was very fond of doing this. At the end of the evening, he would take them all out on the lawn, and he would look up at the sky, and back then the night sky didn't have as much ambient light, so even in the lawn of the White House, there were lots of stars to see. So he'd be looking up, and eventually all the guests would look upward, and finally he would say, after a long pause, "Gentlemen, I believe we are small enough now, so let's go to bed." When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in the beauty of the water, and the great heron feeds, and I come into the peace of wild things, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. And for a moment I feel small, and for a time I rest in the grace of this wide, beautiful world, and I am free. My spiritual friends, looking out at the deep blue sea, looking up at the vastness of the night sky, looking at the amazing complexity and strength of a tiny little hummingbird, we feel a sense of wonder and awe at the beauty and magnificence of the natural world. And we so often feel a tremendous sense of peace and well-being, don't we? I've been really fascinated by hummingbirds for a long time, especially lately. And I can tell you I feel very small when I come into the presence of one of these tiny, magnificent little creatures. My spiritual friends, this month we celebrate Ralph Waldo Emerson's birthday, and we are so grateful for that transcendentalist stream of our UU tradition that Waldo put into play. We are grateful for the transcendentalist teachings that encourage us to find the sacred in the natural world. So all of you who are out there not attending Zoom, spending time in nature this morning, it's all part of the theme for the morning. The teachings of the natural world remind us we are connected to something much, much larger than ourselves, much, much larger than our really small selves, no matter how big we think we are sometimes. We are part of what we Unitarian Universalists like to call the interdependent web of all existence. Transcendentalists remind us that nature can provide us with a ground of our being, that which is deep enough and strong enough in our lives, that which provides us with the clarity and the vision to see beyond our suffering and our fears to the mystery and awe and wonder of it all, and that which gives us the strength to move through our fearful feelings about the future. That which invites us to celebrate all we have here in the beauty of the present moment. That larger natural reality that we're a part of even in the worst of our days. Writing about the spiritual gifts of Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of my colleagues, says this: life is difficult, but try as we might to ignore its call, the universe continues to beckon us. We live, after all, in a world of incredible beauty, and reminders of the wonder and mystery of life are everywhere. Sometimes we are overwhelmed, as when we witness the birth of a child or the death of a loved one. Sometimes we are simply caught off guard when the sunlight catches the trees in the late afternoon. There's a deep-seated longing to feel connected with the sacred, which is simply another term we use to describe the sense of mystery and wonder. We are, after all, creatures descended from ancestors whose natural habitat was not in houses or buildings, but in meadows and mountains, fields and in forests. We are animals whose natural roaming ground is not the aisle of the supermarket, but the path along the river's edge. We are beings whose natural inclination is not to dance our fingers across a computer keyboard, but to plunge our hands deep into the dark skin of Mother Earth. A walk in the woods, 5 minutes on the back porch, a moment in the sun. These help recall us to our natural selves, to our best selves once again. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake up in the middle of the night at the least sound, in fear of my own life or my children's lives and what they may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and where the great heron feeds. And I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with worrying about grief and suffering and what happens tomorrow. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. And for a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. May it be so for all of us. Amen.
Where I grew up, there was more blue than green. We learned like the spaces in between. Everywhere you go, there you are. No matter how surprising or how far, some things I will never understand. How a weary heart can open and expand. My soul can only travel in one day to the edge of the longing and a little more away. I don't know how, I don't know why. Always felt so at home beneath the shelter of the sky. Don't know what it might imply. Always felt so at home beneath the shelter of the sky. I dreamed of you last night. I asked her, Charlie, are you still alright? You smiled and then you said to me, I've been out walking beneath some mighty fine trees. Don't know how, I don't know why. Always felt so at home beneath the shelter of the sky. I don't know what it might imply. Always felt so at home beneath the shelter of the sky. Everywhere I was, all that I've become, every silent hour and song I've sung, nothing's ever gone, but it's passing by beneath the shelter of the sky. Don't know how, don't know why. Always felt so at home beneath the shelter of the sky. Don't know what it might imply. Always felt so at home beneath the shelter of the sky. I don't know what it might imply. Always felt so at home beneath the shelter of the sky.
My friends, until we meet again, may you be blessed. Now go be a blessing to the world, but bless yourself by going outside. We're sitting here in the chapel looking at this amazing day outside. What a gift of a day. By the way, speaking of amazing, we want to say thanks to Mary Lynn Carson for the flowers. They're in celebration of her daughter Marin's graduation today, 1 year late, but the graduation ceremony is happening today. So see you all next week. Thoroughly enjoy this day.